In the film Ad Astra, astronaut Roy McBride is sent on a covert mission into space to find and neutralize his lost father, Clifford McBride. Clifford, lost for years, was originally sent to the edge of the solar system to search for extraterrestrial life. Clifford's experiments may be the cause of recent antimatter power surges that threaten life on Earth. Roy, cold, outwardly unemotional, and introspective, struggles with his dangerous and personal mission, discovers his father, destroys the vessel responsible for the surges, and returns to Earth. Many who experience Ad Astra feel the subtext of the narrative is that Roy's mission mirrors the search for God, Roy searching the stars for the Father, Clifford searching for life that is not human to determine whether or not we are alone. Characters need not fit neatly into one-to-one designations in order to experience the narrative this way. The pursuit of God is also the pursuit of humankind's relationship with God. Does God love us? Does God not love us but expects us to love Him? Is God afraid of us? Is God disappointed in us? When Roy reaches Clifford, he finds that his father is not elated to see him. Clifford is unconcerned with Earth, unconcerned with Roy, and completely opposed to leaving the vessel, leaving the Lima project.
Define what science claims does not exist.
Clifford's activities are causing antimatter surges that threaten all life. If God loved us, would we be subject to threats? Are we significant to God? Roy makes his transmission to Clifford from a Mars base called Ursa. In Greek mythology, Ursa is a daughter of Zeus, but has no other role to play in mythology. She is insignificant except that she is Zeus's daughter. If we are all God's children, at some point, does this uniformity and this lack of uniqueness make this quality insignificant? Clifford has been orbiting Neptune for decades. Neptune is the god of the sea in Roman mythology. In Greek mythology, he is called Poseidon. Roy's shuttle is called Cepheus. In Greek mythology, Poseidon sent a monster across the sea to attack Cepheus's home. Poseidon has been angered by Cepheus. Have we angered our god? Is that why the antimatter surges are happening? Roy tells his father that he loves him. Clifford does not respond. He is consumed by his work. Wouldn't God also be similarly consumed?
I have infinite work to do.
Maybe God expects our admiration, our worship, but is under no obligation to return those feelings, that love. But if that's true, isn't our relationship one-sided, abusive, worthless? Scripture in varying faiths has God appearing from time to time and making covenants and telling us what to do, but these scriptures don't add new books, new chapters about modern life, about God appearing in recent centuries. From the perspective of Scripture, God stopped engaging with us directly a long time ago. For the non-believer, the answer to why is obvious, because these stories were written long after the fact, never contemporaneously, and never really happened. For the believer, the question must be answered differently. Isn't the present just as significant a time period? Isn't this dispensation just as meaningful? Maybe God has become afraid of us, afraid of what we have become, afraid we might remove or replace Him. The insistence that God is all-powerful and that His power can never wane is either a guess or something told to us by God Himself, and wouldn't God tell us that whether or not it were true to keep us from challenging Him? Could God ever be disappointed in us? How could God be disappointed if He already knows how everything would turn out? But again, that is only what we think about God. If that were true, God would also never be pleased with us. Haven't we done enough to ourselves that God would be disappointed? This can't be what He wanted. Is that why we feel so abandoned? Roy's father left his wife and child for space. Roy laments his father's absence, how it affected his life. He is alone, but he is also afraid to see his father.
In the end, the son suffers the sins of the father.
Space is emptiness, nothingness. The fear that God has abandoned us can make us feel similarly empty. Roy watches an old video log of his father describing his mission to find extraterrestrial life, and Clifford remarks that he knows that he will. He has faith.
And of course I think of God. I'm overwhelmed at seeing and feeling His presence.
When Clifford recognizes that his mission was a failure, that his search for extraterrestrial life had no results, he agrees to come back with Roy only to let himself go and allow himself to be lost forever in the emptiness of space. God's abandonment is enough to make us abandon our own lives. The fear that God never existed at all might be even more maddening. If he never did, then what are we? Only animals driven by a half-conscious desire for food? And when we are gone, nothingness? Emptiness? The search for God can be so disappointing. But it doesn't have to be. When Clifford finally comes to accept that he will never find extraterrestrial life and remarks that his mission was a failure, Roy says this is not true and that discovering that the answer is no is still an answer. Now they know that they are alone, and with this knowledge they can orient their lives around taking care of each other and taking care of the Earth. We no longer have to wonder, and this knowledge will force us to see each other differently. What's more, the search for God need not be the search for the literal God, a literal being that created the universe and watches over us. Just as Clifford's search is not for the literal God, but for extraterrestrial life, and Roy's search is not for the literal God, but for his father, lost in the heavens. The search for God can instead be one's search for the self, and one's place in the world. A search for meaning, even if that meaning is given to oneself instead of granted by a creator. Several times, Roy must go through psychological evaluations, tests of his self. The closer he comes to his father, the more erratic his evaluations become, because he's still searching. After he finds his father and returns to Earth, his last evaluation shows him to be content, no longer cold and no longer conflicted, ready to be a more complete person, ready to love and to be loved.